Thank you again, Reid, and Zach for kicking off this morning. Tremendous. This is going to be just more of an informal chat between myself and our next guest, Jordan Troester. Jordan is Red Bull, okay? Not the product, the performance center. Because when everyone says Red Bull, we think, yeah, it gives you wings. Yeah, hopefully it does. But it also does an underlying performance sphere behind it, both in Santa Monica and across in Europe and Salzburg as well. My good friend, Conor McGoldrick, Irish guy, I called him up. He's the global performance manager based out of Salzburg. I called up Conor and I said, we've got our human performance summit. He goes, I got the guy. Like, without finishing the sentence, he knew what I got. And by the way, he said, you owe me one because we used to play against each other. But anyway, that's another story. So, but he put me in touch with Jordan. And we'll go into Jordan's bio now in a few moments. But we spoke on the phone, I think around about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago. And he was driving home from work one evening. It was my early time in Melbourne. And it's like, have we met, or like, you know, have we crossed paths, worked together or whatever? Like, very similar sort of story. Really good human being, very modest in his approach, and very open to sharing, you know, what he does within his sector. Then we start speaking about like the performance side of things, and then that dovetailed into the operations side of things and the logistical side of things. And then we spoke to Nina and the team and said, hey, I think this could be a really good fit for the combination this morning. And that's where we've landed. So Jordan, thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's great to delve into your journey, number one, and then, you know, let's talk through the next sort of series of things. So let's start with Red Bull,
yep.
Okay? Let's take us inside, because we got a small snippet from Robin yesterday, because he previously worked there. Yep. Sometimes up to 200 sports. You get athletes coming and going, sometimes with practitioners, sometimes without. Talk me through like a 48-hour sort of approach of an athlete coming to you in your performance center.
Yeah, well, having worked in numerous different environments in sports all around the world, I've been in Red Bull for about the last year, and it's by far the most unique and complex sport environment I've ever been in. At the APC, we think of ourselves as an athlete accelerator. So there's nearly 1,000 Red Bull-sponsored athletes around the globe across 200 different sports disciplines. I always say everything from AJ Dubonsa, our #1 NBA draft pick last night, to people jumping out of planes and setting the record for the longest, furthest wingsuit flying attempt, right? So everything in between, those are the people who are walking through our door, ultimately with a performance challenge to solve, right? They come with a specific question or a specific goal, and our job is to dig down and understand the bottleneck or the constraint that we want to address, and do that as quickly and efficiently as possible. So, we always say if athletes are in with us, they're probably not out where they need to be doing their sport, competing, training, things like that. LA is a great spot to come to. Santa Monica, our training facility is a beautiful place. But if they're spending time with us, they're probably not where they need to be. So we need to get them back out where they need to be as quickly as possible. So it's a very different approach from what I've done in most of my career, which is team-based sports. And it's like, yep, large groups of people and consistent programming, small incremental gains over time. This is a very different approach in that we're trying to isolate a specific goal and make an adaptation in that as quickly as possible that will unlock that next 2 to 3% of performance. So when an athlete walks through the door, it really is about honing in on that need, that one thing that they're looking for. That starts with a conversation, helping them work through the process of verbalizing what they're trying to accomplish and where the limitation might be. That leads into our diagnostics and assessment. We're really fortunate to have just about anything we could imagine, from biomechanics, physiology, testing, assessment, diagnostics. So digging in, understanding the task, the demands of their sport, working back through the physiological, biomechanical constraints of that, hopefully identifying a bottleneck or a clear priority within that, and then building a really clear targeted program that sometimes we try to accomplish in several days, a week, when an athlete is coming through for a stay with us, or we're able to have those recommendations, build a plan that we can integrate and send with them, integrate with their coach, their team, whoever they're working with, and send them away with a really targeted approach to achieve that singular adaptation. So that's really the focus for us.
So it's interesting, and Zach alluded to it in his opening speech this morning. Like, you know, when he was an athlete back in 2006, like, he'd 15 touch points of people, okay? From a logistics or an operational point of view, like, what's your role when an athlete is planning to come in, or a group of athletes are planning to come in, and how many touch points are you managing on behalf of that athlete?
Yeah, there's a lot of legwork that goes into it. The more information we have in advance of their visit, the more efficient and impactful we can be with their time, right? So it's calls in advance with the athlete, with their team, their support staff, our support staff, our operations group inside of Red Bull, coordinating, organizing, all of that. If we can get it narrowed down to the goal of that visit and what they're trying to accomplish, and have a little bit of an idea going in of how we can tailor that, it makes our efforts a lot more efficient.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Okay, sorry, I dove straight in there. Let's look at your journey, okay? Unique journey, multiple sports. Give the audience an insight into, you know, where you've come from and where you've landed today with Red Bull.
Well, I've, again, been extremely fortunate to work in some of the best sport environments all over the globe, and work with some of the best people all over the globe through the process as well. And that's definitely shaped who I've become and the opportunities that I've had along the way. Really, you know, worked in private facility training. My background's as a strength and conditioning coach, eventually as a sports scientist, and now as a kind of a performance director, leader of people. But I've been fortunate to spend time working in rugby in Australia. A really unique experience. While dozens of Australians were coming to the US as sports scientists, I was one of 2 or 3 Americans who went to Australia and found their way into sport. Worked with the New South Wales Waratahs professional rugby team for a number of years, and Rugby Australia for a little while, and really had an opportunity, again, coming from the US, collegiate sport, private sport, professional team sport, to see a different lens. That concept of a high performance model, which I'd probably give credit to Australia and other places in the world for pioneering a much more collaborative and maybe athlete-centered, outcome-based approach to delivering performance services, and got to be really embedded within that, learn from some great people and experience what that looks like, where everybody from the kit man to the head coach can sit around the same table and talk about an athlete's needs and what it takes for them to meet their goals for development or performance, and like build a plan given the information that we have around how to best help that athlete. So really unique experience there. Had an opportunity to get connected into the University of Technology, Sydney. Had questions that I wanted to answer as a coach for myself, which turned into a research project, which eventually turned into a really long paper. And it turns out they'll give anybody a PhD if you publish enough papers, which kind of transferred my career into sports science, and came back to the States and worked in hockey. So the Vegas Golden Knights were an expansion organization looking to integrate sports science kind of for the first time. Hockey's a sport that isn't always on the cutting edge of innovation, but having a chance to build that from scratch there. And then the University of Oregon, where I spent the last 5 years as the director of performance and sports science. So really overseeing, 20 different teams, 500 student athletes, and our performance services across that entire group, and really having to lean on scalable systems within an environment like that. So different challenges in each of those different areas.
I will come back to the Golden Knights in a second, because there's a unique use case that I want to speak about there that we spoke about on your journey, on your drive home that night. But I'm coming into this question's for me, by the way, more so than the audience. But I'd love your point of view from the college side of things to the pro side of things, and the key differences, because there's a lot of folk in this room also have just worked college or just worked pro. Some will have worked a combination or hybrid of both. But is there any key differences that you really seen firsthand, and if you had your time again, you may do things a little bit differently?
I think it's, well, one, college is changing. Many of you, I'm sure, are experiencing that, and maybe it's much more similar to pro than it was, and even in my time from 2020 to 2025, like massive changes within the college environment. I think the biggest thing is just the ownership or the ownership of the athlete over their own performance versus the directive of the organization over an athlete's performance, pathway, expectations. In a professional environment, it very much is up to that individual athlete to own their journey, and you as a practitioner are there to support them in that process on almost an individual basis. What do they need? How can we help them? And what does that look like within the larger ecosystem of our performance organization? At the collegiate level, it still is very much a model of like bringing a large group of people together, bringing them together as a team a lot of times, understanding how to elevate the group as a whole, and sometimes then through attrition, like they separate themselves out a little bit. So again, that's changing really quickly with the way the collegiate landscape has evolved. But that's the biggest difference that I experienced.
Yeah, wow, it's a good insight. All right, let's step back. And one of our conversations when we chatted through stuff was, like, I was fortunate, I was involved in an expansion club in Western Sydney. I let the guys know yesterday a little bit about that. And, you know, we'd no systems. We 8 staff starting off. We were in, like, prefab cabins out the back of somewhere before a facility was built, etc. Talk us through your experience at the Golden Knights, like no systems, no staff, like, and then what you developed there under your sort of ethos.
Yeah, so Golden Knights, I get asked this question a lot. As an expansion organization, there at the beginning, the Golden Knights were actually extremely successful going to the Stanley Cup final in their first season. Everybody always asks me, like, wow, what do you think made the difference? And again, I would say it's one of the most unique organizations I've ever been a part of, because every single person in the entire organization, from human resources to coaching staff, was hired with a very clear vision and directive about what we wanted to accomplish and what their role was in contributing to that goal or that outcome. Everybody had a little bit of chip on their shoulder, even the players, right, who were picked up in an expansion draft. Like, they had something to prove, and they had clarity about where their impact came from. As opposed to the organization where almost everybody can probably think of, like, oh, there's that guy who works down the hallway who's been here for 20 years, and I don't actually know what he does or why he's here, but he's around and people seem to enjoy him. There's 0 people like that in the organization. Everybody knew why they were there, what they were there to accomplish, and there was a really clear vision around it. So that was unique and special in and of itself. And then from my perspective, I had a very clear remit, right? We wanted to make better informed decisions, right? In a world of hockey where informed decision-making, sports science, if you want to call it that, is not well established, right? We've got scouts sitting in cold rinks across the world, drinking coffee and watching kids play, and we want to connect the dots from that to winning in the NHL, and it's been based on opinion traditionally, and we want to put a little bit more objective rigor around that. And so really it was a covert approach brought in as a assistant strength coach / rehab coordinator with the covert directive to build a sports science program from scratch. And so for me, it really started with understanding what are the questions that we're trying to answer, the challenges that we're trying to solve, and what, not data necessarily, but what information do we need to make better decisions about those questions.
Excellent. We speak about challenges, and the engineer is a challenge, I think, with the earcon at the moment. So if we can turn that off, it'd be terrific. Thanks, Nina. Beautiful. That's great. That's fine. Things happen. Delay play, drinks break in the World Cup. You know, this is what happens. Let's go to a commercial break for 3 minutes and earn so much millions of dollars. That's what we could got out of this. But anyway, it wasn't planned. Can you hear us still okay? Okay? We can raise our voice a little bit. We'll let it calm down a little bit. That's fine. We've got time. Beautiful. Here we go. Drinks break is over. How good. We're back. Thanks, Jordan. He did speak about challenges before, so hopefully you could hear that. let's jump into some real life case. I know you're really passionate around like profiling and load monitoring and the athlete as per se. So let's jump into that for a second around, you know, what has data, you know, taught you over your journey, I guess, and maybe if there's any real life examples that you want to unearth for our audience today, and you know, that the journey, that the data that took you on as opposed to your roles that you played in that.
Yeah. So again, I've embraced this sports science space a little bit, and I think there's, especially here in the U.S., there was probably a fork in the road around sports science. One of those was very much data-centric, right? The data scientist, sports scientist, and one of those is very much applied, the strength coach sports scientist. And my goal is to merge those, in that data for data's sake doesn't accomplish anything. We want to use information to make better decisions. So much of my last several stops has really been around educating people within the staff, the coaches I work with, the athletes, the organization as a whole of what sports science is and what we're here to accomplish. And ultimately, that's just using data or information to improve our decision-making processes. And so that has to start with a question in the first place, and then we can work backwards towards the information that we need to answer that. And yeah, you mentioned that concept of profile, load, and monitor. That's kind of a framework that we built at the University of Oregon. I was fortunate to step into an environment where the sports science department, structures, systems were really well established, but we still didn't have probably integration across all of our teams, all of our coaches, all of our sports. The infrastructure was there, but the action and the outcomes still weren't fully realized. And so being able to put a clear framework around what we're trying to accomplish. We want to profile the demands of the sport. What does it look like to be successful? We want to objectively have some information about KPIs for success, and then we want to profile our athletes, understand their capacities in relation to those demands of the sport, understand the gaps so that we can be more targeted in our development. Loading, again, we think load monitoring, but it's really just development, right? What are we doing to develop those qualities that are going to result in the performance outcomes that we want? And then how can we monitor that progress as we go? And again, we think about technology. There was, data science, applied sports science. The third one is like, technology-driven sports science, which I think is part of why that field has grown so much, is because sports technology has gotten so big. But I think the technology can throw us off the trail as much as it can help us if we're not careful, because we can start chasing metrics for metrics' sake rather than answering specific questions with the data that comes to us. So
yeah, like his role fascinates me. And like after speaking probably the last 4 to 6 weeks, and like I still can't get my head around the fact that, so let's say I'm over a team, or Nick Wilkman's over the Irish rugby team, or I'm sure everyone is involved in some sort of a team capacity. Like, my mind goes to, how do I let my athletes, one, go, and how do you let the athletes go away and trust the process when they're out there in the real world, and then to come back to you, trusting that work will be done, practitioners would instill, systems that you've sort of already set up for them, so they don't essentially come back to you broken as per se. How do you handle that sort of thing?
Yeah. For us, one of the things that we really focus on is the key to performance ultimately is behavior change, right? So the performance outcome is dictated by an athlete making choices on a daily basis. So if we can influence those choices within our environment or beyond our environment, that's the most powerful thing that we can do. I always talk to my staff of like, hey, your technical expertise is important, but your ability to influence behavior is by far the most valuable skill that you have. And so, back to the data, like we can use data and information to help create buy-in, sometimes to help, generate good conversation and collaboration among an athlete's coach or the athlete themselves, our staff, when it comes to problem solving. But then ultimately, we want to create the engagement and the environment to change that behavior to fuel more consistently, or to recover in a certain way, or to integrate certain training protocols. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And our biggest challenge at Red Bull in particular is the fact that we've got so many athletes from so many different disciplines spread out all over the world. And so really facilitating that just engagement process becomes a real challenge for us. At Oregon, I always like to think of having 20 different teams, and I had a mini high-performance team within each of those different environments, right? It's like, okay, over at the track and field with our throwers, this is my point person, that S&C coach, they're over it, and like they're gonna be my mini high-performance director in that environment. They understand the process, they're gonna have the people, the expertise to collaborate around, and they own that space, and I'm gonna have lots of those. Now, I almost look at it as 1,000 mini high-performance teams all over the world, with the athlete oftentimes having to take ownership for themselves and coordinate or facilitate with the various service providers and networks that they're a part of, whether that's a national governing body or a team that they're a part of. They've got to take a lot of ownership over that for themselves, and we're really working to educate and empower them to do that better.
Yeah, well, I would imagine you live online, you know, a lot of the time with these people as well, to ultimately ensure that you're on that same page, you know, once they come to the facility. So when you are, you know, surrounding your high performance team around an individual athlete or a group of athletes that are coming in with a support team that may be coming to the facility as well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that around like a use case that, you know, you may see on a, you know, an annual basis, daily basis, whatever that may be. And essentially, how do you make sure that that doesn't fall apart?
When the athlete's coming in and really the best case scenario for us is the athlete coming in and bringing their team with them, right? Because that gives us access to their team. We had a decathlete, one of the best in the world, come in with his coach from Switzerland over the past 2 weeks for a training camp, and that's the ideal for us, right? Because it just takes time to have those conversations with the athlete and with the coach, and we can understand what the problem is, and we can start to solve around that, and we can start to put all the expertise that we have in-house into a little ecosystem for them, right? Mental performance actually becomes really valuable, not just, you know, sports psychology, but can we be proactive in addressing the mental skills and the neurocognitive training that's going to maybe elevate that athlete and provide them with something they didn't have before. Nutritional, very specific nutritional interventions, just understanding all the pieces that are already there in place. When we can get the athlete, the coach, that team around them, and then our expertise that we have in-house together, that's when like real performance breakthroughs happen for us.
Yeah. Okay, that's really insightful. Let's just pivot a little bit to what you're using and technology a little bit. Not so much, you don't have to tell us exactly what you're using, but the decision around using that technology. Is there some sort of a framework or criteria you jump into to say, hey, I think I should use that and this is the reason why, or no, we're not going to use that and why? So we touched upon this, you know, when we spoke a little bit around, you know, our products and whatnot, and what we use as well. But yeah, I'd love to jump inside your evaluation sort of criteria that you use to ensure you're using the right things.
Yeah, this is a huge focus for us at the APC. Within the world of Red Bull, right, we sponsor all these athletes, and we're a training facility to support them. But there's also global Red Bull teams, right? Soccer clubs, five clubs around the globe, Formula One, which is very high profile, cycling, rugby now, hockey. And our goal at the APC is both to support our individual athletes, but then also support the success of these teams. And we have a saying, you know, that we want to be an unfair advantage. We want the APC to be an unfair advantage for Red Bull athletes and Red Bull teams. And in order to do that, we have to provide something that they can't get anywhere else, right? So what do the athletes, what don't they already have? What do these teams who've got, you know, full support systems around them, what don't they already have? And so for us, one of those areas is R&D and innovation, right? Can we be an R&D lab for the world of Red Bull, and can we explore the fringes of technology in sport and link solutions to real world problems? And so we kind of have a framework that we like to think through around that. And it ultimately starts with with impact, right? So can we work backwards? And I've said this probably a dozen times already, but hey, what is the question or problem that we're trying to solve? And hey, here's the technology that addresses that. If we go the other way, start with a technology and then try to find the application somewhere, you're always fighting that battle of trying to get buy-in from a coach, from someone somewhere. But if you start with a coach who has a problem and then you go find the solution, buy-in is no longer an issue. So we always start with that impact. And then the next thing we come back to is the reliability. So for us, really, really important is just understanding the reliability and sensitivity of that technology. And so we do a lot of internal pilot testing. Test, retest, understand the variability within that either technology itself or just the testing protocol so that we can be clear about interpretation of those results. Validity is really important to us, but that's sometimes the hardest one. Can we compare this against a gold standard? So for us, at the moment, we're exploring a lot of computer vision-based technologies. We saw some of those in that last presentation. It's a game changer if we can do movement screening or if we can capture range of motion data from like in practice, in-game type of a scenario. But we have the infrastructure internally to validate computer vision biomechanics versus gold standard marker-based biomechanics. So doing some of that validity work. And then the last one is scalability for us, right? So validity, reliability, scalability, and impact. It's really easy for us at the APC, like everything's scalable when you're working with one athlete, right? It's not a challenge, but will this solution translate to a team of 35 in one of our soccer clubs? Will it translate at the University of Oregon? The use case was always 120 football players at 6 a.m. on the field, right? Will this solution scale and execute in that sort of environment? So understanding the context and where we need to apply that information drives our adoption strategy. And so whereas, a lot of times, depending on your organization and your needs, like the technologies that you'll evaluate will be like well established. One of our goals at the APC is to expand that sphere just a little bit to the fringes of what's new, what's happening, and what's very exploratory, so that we can try to be 2 or 3 steps ahead and do the work ourselves to validate it and hopefully find a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, great. Guys, I'm going to throw it up open for questions now in a second. I'll just go on one more question for you from my end. You've said that the future is going to be optical versus wearable. And we've spoke about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd love to jump into that a little bit for the audience.
Well, hey, we just heard about AI. We heard about optical. We heard about all these things. So the future is going to be a lot of things. GPS, sports science, right? You could say GPS launched the sports science, the applied sports science movement, whether it's force plates or GPS or whatever it is, right? These technologies have pushed us forward, and they've driven a lot of job opportunities, right? It's like, oh, we got this new technology, now we need a person to run it. And so there's an entire field that's kind of been built around this. I actually think, like we said, we're at an inflection point where the technologies that we're going to have available in the future will require less touch from the athlete and less touch from the staff. And that's why I think optical is so intriguing, is because ultimately our biggest limitations to capturing better information are the athlete's time, energy, and intention, right? So if we have low touch, no touch technologies that can be integrated seamlessly within the environment and provide us with rich, meaningful, reliable, valid, actionable, scalable, impactful information through the training process that's at hand, that's where the game changer is going to be. And again, there's going to be a lot of people, and I would say those technologies, they're not ready for full-scale adoption yet. We can't let it just spit us answers, but I think it's important for us to do the work to understand what it can tell us versus what we've used in the past, and what the potential advantages are there, and what's missing, right? Where do we have to take that information within the context of the accuracy and sensitivity of what it provides for us now, understanding that it's going to grow and improve. It's actually interesting because I was just having this conversation the other day, right? Our limitation now is storage, right? So especially when it comes to video and optical, we can film everything, we can have the video, we can run the models and get the information now, but we actually we need to keep that video because the models are only going to get better, and we need to be able to rerun them on that video. So storage becomes the limiting factor for us to leverage the power of optical now and optical 3, 5, 10 years from now. And so that storage challenge is probably, one of the limiting factors at the moment.
Ooh, excellent, excellent, great insights. Guys, any questions? Just pop your hands up. I know Nina and I think Carla down there have microphones. Anything from the operational side? I guess another question I may have, just especially from the operational side, like being on the technical side of the business they are now, like how much crossover do you have, or how much crossover do you need to have to ensure that fluidity when those athletes come into the building?
Well, so for us at the APC, like the operational side is huge, just because the athlete flow for us is so important. We don't have a team schedule that we're trying to optimize, right? We have, 10 to 20 different individual schedules on a daily basis, and we have bottlenecks in capacity, whether that's in diagnostics or on the training floor, or time with a physio, or nutrition consultations. And so, working with our operations team to make sure that athlete flow is as seamless as possible is a huge challenge. And then ultimately that everything that happens inside the center, we're able to extend outside of our four walls and maintain that interaction, that engagement, and that impact beyond their 24-hour, 5-day, 3 weeks, however long it is with us, isn't long enough to maximize our impact. We need to extend that beyond our walls.
Yeah, interesting. Any questions from the floor? Just don't all raise your hands at once. That's cool. Yeah, we got one at the back.
Yeah. Thanks for the time. I would love to know, from whether it's APC currently or your time at the Knights, just your overall leadership plan, getting the right people in the right positions, asking the right questions, and just overall identifying what is the clear integration practices so that everyone knows what that means and moving forward in the same direction.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, right? I probably spent a lot of my career focused on the technical details, and that's transitioned over my last couple roles to thinking much more like organizationally, and so that's been a learning challenge, a growth area, a growth opportunity for me, and it's actually fascinating, right? So figuring out how to promote teamwork. We talk about that high performance team model, but it comes down to the people in the room, the systems that are in place to help encourage and facilitate collaborative work, and then ultimately having the incentives in place to reward not just the outcomes, but the process, right? Do we have the right people executing the process, and can we reward them for executing that process correctly, regardless sometimes of the outcome, because there's a lot of outcomes that we can't necessarily control. So again, one term that I've used a lot is around our high performance team is clarity. So it starts with having a clear vision collectively for what we're trying to accomplish, what good looks like, the problems that we're trying to solve, and our vision for executing that together. Takes a ton of communication amongst our team. Can we speak openly? Can we have kind of that emotional safety to be able to share ideas without criticism within that environment? And ultimately that fuels collaboration, which is just problem solving, right? Can we come together as a group and actually problem solve and turn those discussions, right? The worst case is that conference room, that meeting room that goes on for an hour, and you don't actually end up with an outcome or a plan other than to schedule another meeting, right? So true collaboration means we're in that room together, we're able to get our ideas and our opinions out, and at the end of it, we have a plan that we're all comfortable like going out and executing together with kind of an aligned approach. So yeah, the people side of it is really what makes the whole thing work together.
Excellent. Anyone else? Any other questions? I've got another one. I've got a few in my mind now, because like a lot of us are being involved here in team or individual sports, but like, and you've got soccer teams and whatnot, and like you also have refined extreme sports, like Formula One is one, and then you've got like extreme, you know, motocross, and you've got skateboarding and all these things. So like, I've worked in AFL football, Australian rules football, for 15 years, so I'm comfortable working in Australian rules football. If you asked me to work in, you know, gridiron American football tomorrow, I'd be like, ooh, I probably can't, but I'd probably get there.
Yeah.
So like, how do you like go from Formula One to skateboarding to motocross or something like that, probably in the same day?
Yeah, well, and maybe just through practice, I guess, right? So across my career, that's where I found myself more times than not. I showed up in Australia barely knowing the first thing about rugby, and feeling lost between Australians' accents, technical terms about the game, and yeah, Australians.
And Australians in general. I lived there for 15 years.
Australian slang, I was lost. But learning a sport with fresh eyes, being able to ask dumb questions, same coming into hockey and really not knowing much about the sport, but being able to see it with fresh eyes. I think there's actually a huge advantage to that. If you've got the humility to ask questions, and maybe the knowledge base to start to put pieces together and build frameworks in your mind. And so that's really how we approach all of our sports at Red Bull. Is not the worst thing you can do is sit down with an athlete who's one of the best in the world at what they do and pretend like you know like their sport, right?
Or change what they're doing.
Or change what they're doing. So it's really just having an open mind and a lot of humility and learning from the athlete, learning from the coaches, and asking the dumb questions to get down that pathway of like really defining the demands of the sport, refining, understanding that task, understanding what feels right, what feels wrong when they, you know, pull off a trick, right? What is that fourth rotation coming off the jump? Like, what does that feel like? And when they hit it versus when they don't hit it, what might be that factor? And then can we have the knowledge base to tie that back to like, oh, you know what? We see limited range of motion in this area, or you know, your power profile or your biomechanical profile in this type of movement might be related to that. And like, hey, can we work towards a plan to address that? Those are the pieces where it all starts to come together.
Excellent. Last one. We'll wrap it up, and I want to explain a couple of things that are happening now in a few moments' time. But for the audience in the room, we've got like performance directors, we've got operation leaders. What questions should they be asking themselves on the way home this evening? Whether you're flying, driving, whatever it is, what piece of advice or questions should they be challenging themselves with?
Yeah, again, my approach is all about problem solving and solving challenges for our teams, right? Teams and our athletes. So on your way home, if you think, hey, what's the one challenge or problem? What's the question that I've got an athlete asking or a coach asking that would make the biggest difference for them? What is that one question? Rather than feeding them data to inform that question, let's define the question and let's work backwards and find the information that's going to help us understand that a little bit better. Second one is like, what's our vision? Like, how do we go from where we're at now to like the best in our space? What can we be the best at? That's something that we ask ourselves a lot at Red Bull. What can we be the best at that no one else can? And what's it going to take? What kind of focus is it going to take for us to get there? And who are the people that we need in order to do that? The areas of expertise, the processes and systems that will allow us to be the best at what only we can do. We don't want to compete at somebody else's game. We want to define our own game, and we want to be the best at it. So those are the two things that I think are interesting to think about as you leave here today.
Excellent, stimulating conversation. I'm fortunate. I'm gonna Santa Monica on Friday morning, so we got the pleasure to have a walk through the facility. So I'm really looking forward to that and seeing everything you've said sort of come to real life, so I can imagine as a visual. So really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming today. Give it up for Jordan, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, bear with me 1 second.